Thank you, Daniel. As a data guy, I feel compelled to start with a few numbers. Last year, Tipping Point grantees served 137,000 people. Among them, over 2,400 were placed in jobs, almost 4,000 students enrolled in college, and 5,700 people found homes. But behind the numbers are stories, individual stories, that have inspired me to share my own path to this work today for the very first time. I was born in El Salvador in 1979, right at the beginning of the Civil War. My parents met in high school, where my father was named valedictorian of the country. A title that meant that he could go to any university in the world. But by the time he graduated, the conflict had started and all bets were off. Instead of pursuing an engineering degree, he came to the States to escape the violence and to start a life for us. He ended up in New York, doing construction, cleaning chimneys. He sent us whatever money he could. Back in San Salvador, the city was overrun by violence. And when my 15-year-old uncle spoke up to defend us against government officials, we found him dead in the street the next day. Afraid for our lives, we fled. In New York, life was hard on my parents. A new language, no documents, limited opportunities to find work. Both my parents are the oldest siblings, so they felt responsible for the emotional and financial well-being of the entire family. It took a toll. My father was physically abusive to my mother from very early on. At the same time, my younger sister Victoria and I were shown incredible love. Our education was the #1 priority. Rather than timeouts, my father would sit us down at the dining room table with an old algebra textbook. When we moved to the Bay Area, they chose neighborhoods based on schools. And when I got into a pre-college program in the 8th grade, they photocopied my acceptance letter and mailed it out to all our relatives. They wrote, "Nick va ir a la universidad." Nick's going to college. So I joined 3 and 3, a program at my school structured to help at-risk youth get to college. My mother worked 12-hour days as a seamstress, and my father ran an upholstery shop in San Anselmo. We did okay until the mid-90s, when the economy took a turn. As a small business owner, the pressure to keep the doors open weighed heavily on my father, and the possibility of losing our home hung over us. I never talked about the violence, but after another fight, when the police were finally called, my parents separated. I could see the relief my mother felt when my father left. When he returned for the holidays, everything unraveled. My mother suffered a mental break. Everything my father did to comfort her made it worse. It was Thanksgiving. He tried to cook the meal, but our Doberman jumped on the table and ate the turkey. You could feel it in the house. Something bad was going to happen. I woke up early the next morning for my shift at Jack in the Box. When I got out of the shower, my sister was screaming. I walked into the bedroom. Both my parents were dead. My father had shot my mother and then himself. We called 911. Within 30 minutes, the police were there, checking my hands for gunpowder. My friend showed up. We were all crying. It was on the front page of the paper the next day. At 16, the future for Victoria and I was up to me. There was a lot of pressure from both sides of the family. Some relatives wanted to separate us, send one to Washington, the other to Florida. I refused. We became wards of the court. But my father's brother, William, his wife, Claudia, and their 2 daughters took us in. We moved into their small apartments, just a few blocks from our house. In the 2 decades since my parents passed away, I've had hundreds of hours of therapy. I've spent more than half my life thinking about who they were as individuals, thinking about what motivated them, and why the end of their story was so dark. Through my work with Guardian Scholars, a Tipping Point grantee that supports former foster youth in getting a college degree from San Francisco State, I came across a concept that reminds me of my father. It's an idea called vigilant self-reliance. Early research indicates that young people who are too independent, resilient to a fault, actually end up dropping out of college. It's those who ask for help when they need it, who practice letting others into their lives that ultimately succeed. My father did not let anyone into our struggles. Maybe he resented those that had promised him opportunities when he was younger. Maybe it's the machismo of our Latin culture. Maybe after years of back-breaking sacrifice and never making enough, he didn't know where to turn. For a long time, the thought of family was painful. My sister and I struggled in our transitions to college. Normal teenage hardships, getting over a breakup, or passing that hard math class, could knock us off course for a whole academic year. But after 7 years at Sonoma State, I became the first in my family to graduate from college. Victoria followed me, becoming an engineer, the same degree my father had wanted so many years before. I often think that my bachelor's degree is for my mother and my father. It's the other legacy I believe they deserve. My master's from USC is for my Uncle William and my Tia Claudia, who are here today. And thank you, because without your unconditional... It was your unconditional love that allowed me to aim higher than I imagined possible. Poverty is violent. It wears you down. It's having to take 3 buses to work every day, walking a mile with heavy groceries. It's passing that stretch of sidewalk where someone you know was shot and the street light has been out for months. It's the pain you feel when you lose somebody you love. It's how your brain gets cloudy when a siren echoes off the streets of Market Street years later because you're reliving that trauma in your body. I came to Tipping Point because the Bay Area is my home. Our grants support 47 organizations that reach out to those in need. Our mental health initiative prevents unnecessary tragedy. The data we collect helps us identify our group's strengths and channel the generosity of this community to make them even stronger. Together, we do right by those brave enough to change their lives for good. I am a product of an intervention that worked. In the wake of devastating loss, it was my pre-college program that kept me on track. The staff went above and beyond to help my family heal and allowed me to hold on to my dreams. I know that when things feel dire, when you're not sure if you can go on, that's when the right opportunity can lead to something radically better. Thank you for your support. It's a privilege to work with the other 30 members of the Tipping Point team, and we could truly not do this work without everyone in this room.